Well, hello then, I do hope you're all well. Now, there's going to be one or two of these, and recognise this guy. Yes, this is Lord Geidt. Yes, he's Boris Johnson's independent advisor. Oh, as this was being recorded and edited, he was. But anyway, this week, in a cross-party select committee meeting, which was about the ministerial code, yeah, you just couldn't make that shit up, could you? Our Boris Johnson's independent advisor, Lord Geidt, was asked by Labour MP John McDonnell at the time when all this was all going on, did he consider resignation since it was clear that our Prime Minister Boris Johnson clearly didn't take any ounce of interest in anything he had to say? And to say, well, did he fail to deny whether he did or whether he did not? Only you could, either you or I or anybody else can tell. I have no idea. But let's just say it was painful to watch. And sorry for the butting in, because I'll be honest, you could tell reason why our Boris Johnson picked him, because there's nothing about him. And like as I say, even though at the time of this editing he did finally resign, didn't he? But it's still worth a watch, isn't it?
I don't want you to take the next series of questions personally. It's only business. Okay. It was reported that you'd seriously contemplated resignation after your advice was apparently not accepted by the Prime Minister. Can you say whether that's true or not? And what, if you did contemplate resignation, what persuaded you not to?
Thank you. I'm very aware that a very great deal of commentary was swirling around at the time of my annual report on the 31st of May, and this is not to say anything other than I haven't got in print, but I hope to be very clear in my annual report and the preface that I had about indeed what the commentariat I think spotted was perhaps a frustration on my part. I'm glad that the Prime Minister was able to respond to my report, and in doing so,
that's all very well and done, but that's the answer to another question. He asks you, did you contemplate resigning? And if you did, what stopped you? It's none of this word salad.
Addressed aspects of the things about which I was clearly frustrated. But
did you contemplate resignation?
We mentioned in my last evidence to this committee that, of course, resignation is one of the rather blunt but few tools available to an independent advisor. I'm glad that my frustrations were addressed in the way that they were, and may I speak to resignation generally? I mean,
did you contemplate resigning? Yes or no? And if you did, what stopped you?
I think I mentioned at the start of this session of evidence, of course, the difficulties that arose after, not because of, but arose after my predecessor, Sir Alex Hannon's resignation, because of this gap that opened up for full 5 months after his departure. And I will hold to the view, Mr. McDonnell, that on balance, I believe it's right.
Did you contemplate resigning, and if you did, what stopped you?
Right and proper that there should be an independent advisor in post to make sure that the regular business does not go unattended, as was the case in that 5-month lacuna. So we have, with the assistance of the office that I've now had sort of stiffened, we're back on track in being able to publish twice a year the full list of ministers' interests, and indeed to now stick to a timetable where the independent advisor can publish a full annual report.
You haven't answered directly the question whether you contemplated resignation.
I think it's fair to say that it's always, I've mentioned that there are a few instruments available to an independent advisor, and important to consider what is going to work best in the interest, not of me, but of...
It's an easy question, either yes or no. And then if you did contemplate, why didn't you?
Preserving the integrity of the system and of the code, and in making it work, in advising the Prime Minister on holding ministers, including a Prime Minister, publicly to account. So,
mate, you say all that nonsense. You can't even give a straight answer. Never, let alone hold anybody to account. You're just a wet blanket, aren't you?
Again, I haven't given you a direct answer, but I don't think there was ever a single direct proposition in my own mind.
I'm going to take that answer as at least it was on the agenda.
We mentioned before in evidence that it's always on the agenda as an available remedy to a particular problem, and one that my predecessor indeed exercised in November.
That does take us back to what you said before the committee previously. So when you appeared before us last year, you suggested that, and I quote, public confidence will have flowed from the decision of your predecessor, Sir Alex Allen, to resign. What do you think the effect of your unwillingness to resign so far has been?
Some things have changed since Sir Alex's principled resignation, and they include the very considerable transparency that has increased in the role. So having an independent advisor sitting in post, capable of not just offering independent advice, but causing that independent advice to be made public, I think now has become of service to public confidence. There is, with the limitations that I mentioned earlier, and they are very few, relating to the possibility of the Prime Minister withholding consent. The independent advisor now can use the facility for media broadcast as necessary to record the independence of his advice. So that is a change, if you like, from the point when Sir Alex moved on.
You suggested publicly that you've avoided offering the Prime Minister advice that he would reject, which would then result in your resignation. Has this been limited to the initiation of inquiries, or has it been more generally? And can you appreciate the impression that gives of self-censorship?
Yes, I can. I'd like to use this opportunity to make clear that, firstly, there has been no occasion in my past year where, advice has been rejected, or indeed an application to initiate an inquiry has been dismissed. I agree. It's very important to ensure that there's a clear understanding of the independence of the independent advisor. But even if that's a relative term, as some would suggest, but I do think, Mr. MacDonald, that the available capacity to publish really is in the service of appreciation and appreciation and public confidence.
I think that's an undoubted advance, but weigh it in the scales against the following. The appointment of the independent advisor is not done as was recommended by the Standards Committee independently or by an independent panel in the normal processes. When you were forced before, you said the conversation, I think it was with the Cabinet Secretary, your name was alighted upon. That gave the impression it was the traditional gentleman's club over the port agreement. That's the first thing. The second thing is where advice has been given, you provided advice, it was initially ignored and you didn't resign, and by the sound of it you didn't threaten resignation. The Prime Minister then gives the excuse he never even received the advice, even though you obviously have been in conversation continuously with his civil servants. We're still in a situation where it does require Prime Minister consent for inquiries. You've narrowed the grounds, but to be frank, it's still open to the interpretation of the Prime Minister, and it's still in the hands of the Prime Minister what sanction is levied against any minister, including himself, bizarrely, when there's an offence against the ministerial code. Weigh that in the balance of you just being able to achieve the reporting of some elements of advice. And can I suggest to you that actually the balance is that actually your role, I don't want to be crude, but it's little more than a tin of whitewash.
Don't sit on the fence, John McDonnell. Just tell us what you really think. And I think he's absolutely spot on. It's just a tin of whitewash. It's just spent an hour or so just talking utter rollicks all the way through.
Thank you. We discussed in my last evidence the nature of my original appointment, and you're right to allude to how it was done. You know, my capacity to affect the basis upon which I was appointed, I'm afraid, is very limited. I was appointed on the basis that you've just recounted, and what motivated me to do that, what it was to try and be in the service of the ministerial code. I did so, you may recall, in the knowledge that I was already walking into an inquiry. So I never expected, this is a slightly personal comment, I never expected it to be easy, but how can I defeat the impression that you're suggesting of a sort of cosy, insufficiently independent relationship? I think it's very hard. I will freely admit, but I'm trying my best to work with what I've got.
And like as I say, sorry for the butting in if it felt a bit over the top, but watching him, you could tell there's nothing about him. And I'll be honest, for the whole hour and a half he spent trying to convince this cross-party select committee that he had authority and he was independent, they were just laughing at him. And I'll be honest, I've said it a few times when I was watching it, if he had an accent like mine, or maybe from the West Midlands, they'd have laughed him out the building. Well, they practically did, but if anybody else would have said the nonsense he spouted, this would have been in the news and front and centre in any right-wing rag if it had been some loony lefty. The nonsense he was spouting, and but like I say, there's a fair few of these, and hold on to your hats, guys. This is going to be a hoot. But anyway, I do hope you enjoyed this video, even though it were a bit painful to watch this guy soil himself. Mind you, that's what happens when anybody hangs onto the coattail of the bodge. You know, he just denigrates anything he touches, doesn't he? And everybody else who's near him, the soil themselves for him. But anyway, I do hope you enjoy the video. Until the next time, I shall bid you farewell and take care.